Alright, so you've been practicing your strum for a while, and at this point you're probably wondering, how do I change notes on this thing? Well, don't fret. Today we're going to go over how to fret the ukulele, and fretting is, like I said, how we change the notes that we want to play. So I imagine you've already discovered that you change the note that you play on any given string by simply pressing it down at different spots on the fretboard. And you've probably also noticed that if you press it down lower on the fretboard or closer to the head where the nut is, the lower the pitch, the further down, the higher the pitch. So all we're doing when we fret the ukulele or any string instrument is we're simply changing the vibrating length of the string. So the open strings are all vibrating between the nut, which is this little white piece of plastic on this ukulele, and the bridge, which is down at the bottom. The bridge on a ukulele is fixed, so the only thing that we change is the distance between the bridge and wherever the string is being stopped up here further up the neck. So like I said, open string, it's being stopped at the neck. If we want to change that, we simply fret above one of these silver metal frets, and that changes the vibrating length from the bridge to the fret below wherever we're placing our finger. Now, for the sake of terminology, every fret on a ukulele and most fretted instruments, ones that are chromatic, every fret is a half step from each other. So if you think about a piano, every key on a piano is a half step from the adjacent key. And that includes the white and the black keys. Now, if you think about the way a piano is laid out, you may recall that there are two spots on the piano where there are white keys adjacent to each other, and those two spots on the piano are also half steps. So this general rule applies to fretted instruments or to the piano. The adjacent keys of a piano are a half step apart, and the adjacent frets are a half step apart. Now, another useful thing to know about these step relationships is that there's a particular pattern for the do-re-mi scale that we all know from Western music. So if that's our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So the relationship there is 1, 1, half, 1, 1, 1, half. And what I mean by that is the first two notes are a full step from each other. That means two half steps. So on a ukulele, that would mean that our first note, if we're playing the open third string, that's what I'm playing here, which incidentally is a C note. You don't need to know that. The next note in a do-re-mi scale, remember if we say 1, 1, 1, half, 1, 1, 1, half is our pattern. So the next note we're going to find is a full step above that one, which means two half steps, right? Two halves make a whole. So our next note is going to be on the second fret. And I should point out that we simply refer to the frets by numbers, starting with the very first one closest to the nut being 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So back to our open third string. The next note in our do-re-mi scale is going to be 2 frets above, re, then 1, 1, so we have another 1, 2 frets above, and then a half, which means we just go 1 fret. Remember, these frets are a half step from each other. So we've got do, re, mi, fa, and that's, remember, 1, 1, half. So open, 1, 1, half, and then 1, 1, 1, half. So that means 2 frets apart, 2 frets apart, 2 frets apart, and then 1 fret apart. So we'll do that. So, la, ti, do. So the whole scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So that works anywhere you are on a ukulele. You can start from any note, follow that pattern, and you'll have your do-re-mi scale. If I just randomly start from here, I get my do-re-mi scale. So just a useful thing to know, you don't have to worry about being able to play that just yet. This is just for the sake of demonstration. Now, incidentally, this open third string that I first demonstrated, the do-re-mi scale on, also corresponds to a C note on the piano. So if you start on any C note on the piano, the do-re-mi scale is just the white keys. And you can actually visually see this 1, 1, half pattern, 1, 1, 1, half pattern on the piano by knowing that if you start on C and you only play white keys, you can see the pattern laid out there on the piano. So if you ever forget, you can just think back to how the piano is laid out, where the black keys are, and remember that the C scale is always the white keys, and you'll always remember this 1-1 half 1-1 1 half pattern. Again, the main thing to know here, these frets are a half step apart, and we change notes by placing our fingers above these frets. Now, from a technical standpoint, what we're really after is we want to generate a nice, clean, and clear note, and how we place our finger on the fretboard will kind of determine how clean and clear the note we get is. So here are a few general technical points to help you get a nice, clean, and clear note. First of all, you want to be just behind the fret that you're fretting behind. So if I'm fretting at the 3rd fret of this 1st string, I want to be fretting just above it, right? If I go further up, I'm probably going to start to hear a little bit of buzzing. So I want to be as close to the fret as I can. I want to generally be as perpendicular as I can, rather than putting my finger sort of more parallel to the fretboard. So I want to be as up and down as I can. The reason being, it's easier to apply force in the right direction that way, and you'll avoid muting the adjacent string. So if I'm trying to strum on a chord and I have my fingers flattened, not perpendicular, I'm going to be muting all the strings, whereas I'll get nice and clear notes if I'm perpendicular. So we want to be close to the fret as we can and as up and down as we can. And then as far as pressure goes, it's kind of best to think of providing just enough pressure to get a clear note and not too much more. So a lot of people press too hard on the fretboard, which is not terrible. It will generally yield a cleaner note than not pressing hard enough. Not pressing hard enough will give you buzzing and a fuzzy sound. But you will wear out your fretboard faster, and it will make it harder to play quicker if you're using more pressure. So you want to use just enough that you need to make a nice clear note. And so experimenting with kind of how much it takes to do so, you'll probably be surprised that it doesn't actually take all that much to generate a clear note. So experiment with the pressure, and again, place your finger as clear to the fret as you can, and as perpendicular as you can. Now, if this is your first time playing a stringed instrument, you may find that it's a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning, fretting for extended lengths of time. The ukulele is generally easier on the fingers than other stringed instruments like the guitar, but you will still maybe have an uncomfortable phase until you've developed some calluses on your fingertips, at which point you will no longer notice any discomfort when you fret the strings. So the very first thing to do when you're practicing this is simply practice fretting different notes on the fretboard. It really doesn't matter where. Practice doing it with each of your fingers, your index, middle, ring, and pinky. Okay, so because you're going to want to use all of them. So practice fretting with each of them. Now, we'll be using them all in exercises, so you don't have to go too overboard right now. We'll bake that into the exercises in the course, but just kind of get familiar with the pressure that you need with each finger, and start getting in the habit of using the right technique, getting it perpendicular and getting it close to the fret. Now, it turns out that the song Frere Jacques, or also known as Brother John, or also known as Where is Thumbkin, happens to work very well as a kind of a beginning song on the ukulele. So I'm going to use it as we demonstrate a few different things on the ukulele, but I promise it'll ultimately pay off to have done so. You may get a little bit sick of it, but trust me, it'll be worth it. And so this first fretting exercise we're going to do is going to use that song. We're going to be playing it in the key of C, and we're going to be exclusively, or almost exclusively, using the first string to get our melody notes. So I'm just going to demonstrate the basic melody we're going to be playing here. And we're going to break this up into a couple of pieces. So the first piece is going to be kind of the first half. And so it starts like this. So what we're playing here is 3rd fret of the 1st string, with fretting that with our index finger. We're going to move our middle finger to the 5th fret of the 1st string for the next note, and then our pinky to the 7th fret of the 1st string for the 3rd note. So, and then we're going to release, go back to the index on the 3rd string. And it's a good idea, I think, to get in the habit of keeping that index finger on that 3rd fret. Again, it may be a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning before you have any calluses, but that's generally a good habit to get in if you know you're going to be needing a note again to leave it fretted. So that's our first 4 notes. Next 4 are exactly the same. And I'm just doing this with a slow strum, and that's what I want you to do too. Now, if in the beginning you also want to practice just doing that with your index finger, moving it, that's fine too. There's some value in being able to move up and down the fretboard quickly with just one finger, but definitely also do it with the fingers I've instructed. So that's the first half of the song. I mean, that's the first part of this first exercise. So after we run through that 2 times, we're going to then bring our index finger to the 7th fret, which we've been playing with our pinky. So we're going to move into another position here, and then we're just going to play 7th, 8th, and 10th fret. And we do that twice. And I'm using, again, I move my index to the 7th fret. The 8th fret I'm going to finger with my middle finger, 10th fret with my pinky. So this is the first exercise, okay? So it's the full thing. Move to 7th fret. So first, just try getting that under your fingers, okay? And take as much time as you need. And then the next step is to move to practicing that with the backup track that I've provided. And again, you'll have the ability to adjust the backing speed, but the idea is to find a speed where you can play in time with the music. And if you find that you can't play in time even at the slowest speeds, then just go back to playing it without any type of backup. Rehearse it again, and then go back to it and see if you're ready. And use the backup kind of as a gauge of how well you've learned it and whether or not you kind of need to go back to the woodshed a little bit. Now the second exercise is the second half of the song. So the second half begins with our pinky on 10th fret, and we're essentially reversing that pattern that we just did. So it's 10, 8, 7 on that first string. And then we're going to move our index to the 3rd string. Okay? So, and we do that again. And now we just have the very end of the song. Now, which is the first note is simply that 3rd fret again on the 1st string. But the song changes chords here. So we've been playing a C chord, and we'll get to this more on chords in a future workshop. But you can either do one of 2 things here if you'd like. So the first option is to play that first note on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then just strike the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And you can try to strike it by itself, or just strike the first 3 strings on the strum if you want to. And I'll demonstrate that. So I want to do that with your index finger on both strings. So moving from the 1st string to the 2nd string, all on the 3rd fret. Now you'll note that when you're making that strum, on this part where you're moving to the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, it sounds a little bit dissonant. And that's because, like I said, we've switched chords. So the way to make it all sound sweet is to actually finger a G chord there, which you haven't learned, and you don't have to learn this yet if you don't want to, but this is kind of bonus if you want to go ahead and try. So a G chord is formed by placing your middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, ring finger on 3rd fret of the 2nd string, index finger on 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So these are all 4 strings now. So in that last part of the song, we do this. So now you hear that sounds a lot more harmonious than just playing the 3rd fret of the 2nd string and leaving the others open. And that's because there's a chord change there. So we're playing notes that sound good against that melody note. And the chord has changed, which means the notes that sound good have changed. So this entire second exercise, again, sounds like this. And once again, practice that part on its own, and then move to trying to play it along with the backup tracks. Do it on a slow speed. If you can get it, great, and then move up in speed. If you can't get it at a slow speed, just practice it without backing for a little bit more, and then go back to it when you feel ready.